everybody, whether you're on the East Coast, West Coast, or around the world. This is Coast to Coast. Got the full panel here today. How's it going, everybody?
I'm doing fantastic. The season is over for the Giants, the Dallas Cowboys.
Yep.
Unfortunately, Seattle Seahawks also, it's over.
Yeah. I mean, I'm not that broke up about it. They're a game ahead of where I thought they'd be, right? I thought they were going to be a 9-win team. That 10th win came against a resting Rams. But, if you go back to one of the shows before the season, I thought the Rams and the Hawks were both going to be 9-8 and a wild card. I did not foresee the 7th seed being an 11-win team on the NFC side.
Right.
Oh, interesting. Well, Bo and Stat Guy, I got to issue an apology. I think yesterday I was drinking some of this. Hold on. Which led to me feeling like you guys were doing this. Which then, after I got off the show, I felt like this. So today it leads me to this. I'm just messing with you guys. I just thought it'd be. I saw these stickers today, and I said, "Man, these things are lining up perfectly."
No, it was good stuff. I mean, even everybody in the comments thought you were drunk.
You know what?
Was there a show yesterday?
That's the crazy thing about it.
He's talking about Friday.
Yeah, he's talking about Friday.
Hey, that was the one day that actually I was completely totally sober. I'm sober. I actually have not had a drink in a very long time. But I can see why y'all would think that, though.
Define a very long time.
16 minutes.
Damn. He says like, 35 minutes a long time? Well, hell, listen, if I lived above a bar like Pags did, Jesus Lord.
Well, I mean, that's like when I say I fast. It's like, yeah, in between meals.
Pags, that was me a question. Down there in your living room, do they allow you to run a tab there, or do you have to pay every single time you drink a beer?
So we do not do tabs. Actually, this is just a straight cash bar, so you can't even run a credit card. So they don't have tabs at all. They tell you to go get cash from the ATM.
That's interesting. I don't think I've ever seen a straight cash.
I've
seen cash hairstylists and barbers, but I've never seen a cash only bar.
That's a good way to limit your drinking, though, because if you don't want to charge excess of money to your card, it forces you to basically take out what you want to pay for drinking,
unless you're a celebrity like Hash. People buy you drinks all night, I would imagine.
Let's not pretend they don't think ahead. They have one of those ATMs at the front of the bar.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, absolutely they do. But it doesn't even charge you a lot, actually. It costs more to go to the bank and get your money out to the ATM there or across the street at 7-Eleven. It's actually very reasonable at our bar, which is, kind of funny. It's like actually my bank, if I was to use the bank that I have across the street, I can cross the street and use their ATM for nothing. But if I decide to use the one at the bar, not only do I get the $2 fee at the bar, I get $3.50 charged from my bank.
Your bank will give you, doesn't your bank compensate you though on when you do those drafts? Like I know my bank does. Like if I go
it depends. It depends on the bank.
Wow.
Yeah, not all banks do. Some of them will absolutely gouge you for using an out of service ATM.
Yeah,
that's what happens there.
Yeah.
Pags, you need to get NFCU. I know you're a Navy veteran. You should get some NFCU.
There's not any around here.
You don't have to. There's not one around me either, but I still use one. Hell, I use USAA. They're not around me. I mean, you can use those kinds of, and they'll refund you the ATM fees and stuff. Just something to think about.
Maybe.
I mean,
what a time, man. Yeah, Pags, I watched your game last night with the Eagles, man. That was. I mean, I knew it was going to win that game, but I know you got to be excited. I guess you guys, I kind of caught a little bit of this conversation. I didn't check who you guys were playing in the playoffs, but I'm guessing you're playing the Green Bay Packers.
That is correct. We are playing the Packers.
Wow.
And the somewhat hurt Packers as of yesterday. So
yeah, that's insane to me.
Well,
maybe they'll go trade for JJ McCarthy.
JJ McCarthy, maybe. Who knows?
I mean, that wouldn't make any sense. He's not going to finish this
year.
I'm
being silly. That would just be being silly. My bad. I'm sorry.
Yeah, like you can't put another guy that's joke.
No, but hey, how about those Vikings though? Stat guy, what went on there, man?
This is the one time where I'm giving the Lions all the credit in the world because whatever defensive game plan Aaron Glenn drew up yesterday, it worked. But
that red zone defense was on point.
Exactly. But I am also pinning this loss 100% on Kevin O'Connell for two reasons.
Okay.
I understand not kicking a field goal in the second half. But in the first half, you take the points. He let 6 points on the board because it was basically 4th and goal from the 4. You have a 22-yard field goal. Instead, you go for it, don't get it. Then 3 drives later, maybe, it was 4th and goal from the 5. And again, it's a 23-yard field goal. You don't kick it. You basically let 6 points on the board. Granted, 6 points only gets them to 15, but instead of being down 10-6 at the half, Minnesota's probably up 12-10 at the half, and then the game plan changes a little bit more in the second half where Minnesota can focus more on running the ball, which takes pressure off of Sam Darnold because Sam Darnold got the ever-living shit beat out of him last night. The fact that he was able to get up and even walk off the field in the fourth quarter, I don't know how because I think they said he was hit 27 or 30 times on 40 dropbacks.
That's a lot of
He got absolutely destroyed.
Yeah, no, he was getting hammered. To be fair, though, Goff got hit a lot too.
The first half he did, but if you look at the second half, I think they said Goff only threw like 9 passes the second half, and that's because
they got to lean in on the run.
Yeah, and that's why if you take those 2 field goals in the first half, go into halftime up 12-10, obviously you're going to need to score a touchdown at some point to win that game. But at least having a 12-10 lead, you can focus a little bit more on running the ball to kind of take that pressure off of Sam Darnold as opposed to you're behind 10-6, then you're behind 13-9, or done behind 17-9. You can't afford to lean on the run. You have to continuously lean on the pass at that point to bring yourself back into it. And at that point, it was pretty much, the offensive line can't block worth of shit tonight, so we're just going to tee off.
You can't say SHIT. I found that out the other day. You can't say that word.
Well, it's because it was the only words you were using. Calm down.
This is a loss that I'm going to pin a lot of it on Kevin O'Connell just because of how he called that game in the first half. Like, I'm not taking anything away from Aaron Glenn and what they did in the red zone because the red zone defense that they showed last night was something that Detroit hasn't shown all year. Like, that was the best their red zone defense has looked all season. But as a head coach, Kevin O'Connell tried to do exactly what the Lions do, where they go for it on 4th down more often than kick field goals, and it backfired in his face at the worst possible time.
Let me ask you this. Now, you're a pretty strong Vikings person. I mean, like, there's several instances where I know you've said the Vikings, this is the year for the Vikings. It's the year for the Vikings.
It depends on the weekend if he's a big Vikings fan.
But I'm saying this after this Detroit game, right? So you saw you guys got kind of blown out. Does that waver you anyway to think that maybe Minnesota's just not there? Like they don't have.
Of course, he doesn't have Vikings.
It doesn't. It doesn't waver me at all. It doesn't waver me at all, just because their offensive line hasn't been as strong as it was after Christian Darrisaw went down, and Darrisaw is one of the best tackles in the NFL. So once he went down, you knew the offensive line was going to take a step back. If anything, yesterday was the wake-up call that team needed, especially from an offensive line. Because
I hope so. Because man, you're literally playing, the number 1 team now in the conference, which I still think it's going to be Philadelphia and Detroit. I think in the NFC. But
as good as Darnold has been, it also is. Last night was a prime example of you still need to protect him.
Yeah,
and if you don't protect him, that's the kind of results you're going to get. So I think that was the wake-up call that they needed. But the funny thing is, leave it to the Vikings to possibly have this situation happen where they lost to the Lions and Rams in back-to-back games during the regular season, ended up winning 9 in a row, and then lost to the Lions yesterday. How Minnesota would it be for them to lose to the Lions and Rams in back-to-back weeks twice in the same season?
Oh, I could see that.
Yeah.
No, I could absolutely see the Rams surprising the Vikings round 1. That's why I put Rob's up there. I could absolutely see that happening. Besides, I mean, the Rams are an underappreciated team.
They're 8-2 since they've gotten healthy.
Yeah, exactly.
Like, there's not like they're a 10-7 team that kind of backed into the playoffs. They're a 10-7 team that pretty much got hot mid-season because they got healthy.
No, actually, I would think that when you look at it in the opposite way, where Joe mentioned earlier, don't sleep on the Packers. Packers limped into the playoffs.
Exactly.
What did they
wow.
lose 3 of their last 4 games?
They lost their final 2 games. They won 4 in a row heading into the Viking game 2 weeks ago before they lost, and then they lost to the Bears, but that Bears loss should count as 3.
Yeah, it's so and they last year they got on a little bit of a hot streak.
Yeah, they won 6 of their last 7 and won their final games last year just to get into the playoff last year.
So once they got in, that's when they made some noise because they were a much better team than Dallas was, and then they actually brought San Francisco to the brink.
And see, the comment right there is the difference between this year's Packers team and last year's Packers team. Last year's Packers team got hot at the end of the season because they were healthy. And everything started to click basically around Thanksgiving when they beat the Lions, I think like 45-17 on Thanksgiving or whatever. And that was kind of the game that jump-started them the rest of the way.
Yep.
This season is the prime definition of the Packers are literally limping into the playoffs because Watson went down. He's not going to be playing. Jordan Love is going to play, but he's listed as a game-time decision. Like, there were so many players that got hurt yesterday. They are the definition of, like, limping into the playoffs right now because they're not healthy.
And as much as you like the Ducks there, they also got hurt in that game. So Ducks about to go home again.
Ducks about to go home. They're already flying south for the winter.
Yeah.
She was talking about
The Oregon Ducks.
yeah, well, but she was talking about Tyrod because he was a Duck,
Oh, got ya.
but then he got hurt. So
So ultimately, I think that I kind of still believe. I don't think Minnesota loses to the Rams.
I don't think that. I think they beat the Rams.
close game.
No, it'll be a close game, and I think when you look at the last time they lost to the Rams, it was coming off of losing to the Lions 31-29. It was a short week where they had to fly to the West Coast, and it was the first game where Cooper Kupp and Puka Nacua were both healthy. So it was kind of like one of those snowball effects where the Vikings put all that emotion into beating Detroit, which they lost, and then you're going basically short week, short-handed out west to a team that's getting healthy. Minnesota is not going to overlook the Rams this time, and Kevin O'Connell knows that Sean McVay scheme because he was in it. Same thing with Sean McVay. He knows the Kevin O'Connell scheme because he basically taught O'Connell that scheme. I think it's going to be an overtime game. I think it'll be 27-24 in overtime.
Well,
Yeah, I would be really surprised if Hurts isn't playing.
Did I mention this before that he is fine? Jalen Hurts is fine. They left him in concussion protocol because they didn't have to pull him out, and they didn't have to say anything else about it. He's like, yeah, he's in the protocol. We don't have to talk about him.
Because if they would have been the ones fighting for the number 1 seed this past weekend, he would have played.
100%.
The fact that they knew they couldn't.
He could have played 2 weeks ago.
It's the fact that they knew they had the number 2 seed locked up, and there's no reason to throw him out there because you know you're the 2 seed. What's the point?
Right.
Yeah, there's no reason to potentially get somebody hurt.
Yeah, so ultimately, he's been working out. He's been just fine. Tanner McKee is going to be a very good quarterback somewhere in this league. I'm not sure that he's going to be on the Eagles much longer. I kind of believe that he's going to wind up going and actually competing for a job somewhere, I think, next year.
Mm-hmm.
But, yeah, absolutely. It's a shame because I think we're going to wind up with Pickett. And he's going to be our backup for the remaining portion of time that Jalen Hurts is here. But Tanner McKee is the real deal. That kid can play a little bit.
Yeah. For Stat Guy, what do they get O'Connell's contract figured out, or do they listen to draft picks for him?
No, they'll get it figured out.
Because he's only under contract next year, right?
Yeah, they'll get it figured out. I don't know if he'll get the extension before next season, but there is not a scenario, in my opinion, where he will be traded unless you're getting multiple first-round picks for him.
Who's this?
Kevin O'Connell, because a lot of teams said they're going to try to call Minnesota and try to trade for Kevin O'Connell before Minnesota has a chance to extend him, knowing the success that he's had with all these quarterbacks that he's worked with. So that's kind of why a lot of teams are like, we want to get him here because if we draft a rookie quarterback or if we go and get a free agent quarterback that struggles, we want O'Connell here to see if he can kind of change the way they play. The only scenario that I see that maybe they would consider it is if they get multiple first-round picks for him. Otherwise, I think they might take phone calls because you have to take phone calls. You just got to kind of see what you can potentially get. But I don't think there's a scenario, in my opinion, where they're going to get rid of him.
We're talking
Or do
about a
they listen-
coach.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Coach
Or
goes
do
where he
they
wants
listen to it?
to the money.
If they get absolutely blown out against the Rams.
I think they more so listen to it if the Vikings do not bring back Darnold.
Which I can't imagine why they wouldn't bring him back. I mean, honestly.
If
Because you got this super quarterbacks coach. Why not? Why wouldn't you take the chance?
I think they entertain. I think
Yeah.
they entertain it more if they don't bring back Darnold, because if you can get ultimately 2 first-round picks to help out JJ McCarthy, you kind of have to at least consider it. Versus if you bring back Darnold and you're kind of committing to Darnold now the next couple of years.
Somebody going to
basically-
give 2 first-round picks to a coach?
It's happened before.
Well, yeah.
Yeah, but that
'cause
was for a
Gruden
head
did
coach.
trade.
Yeah, Kevin
Gruden
O'Connell
got
is the head
picks,
coach.
right?
Yeah, O'Connell is the head coach.
Oh, Kevin O'Connell is the head coach.
Oh,
Yeah.
I'm thinking that he's a quarterbacks coach.
He
No,
basically,
he's the head
he basically is the quarterback's coach. He's the offensive
True.
play caller. He's the head coach, and he's also basically the quarterback coach along with Josh McCown. So he pretty much does a lot for that offense.
Okay.
What did Gruden get in those picks? How many picks did they give up for Gruden?
3.
Was it 3?
It was a first and 2 seconds, I believe, or a first and 2/3 for Gruden.
Yeah, and what Belichick was 2 firsts,
Yeah, 2 firsts and a second for Belichick.
and then Sean Payton was 2 firsts and a third.
Wow.
So that's what I said. I think the only way I think the Vikings would consider is if they get the 2 firsts out of it. Other than that, it doesn't make sense for them to even entertain the idea. If they get blown out by the Rams, though, I can guarantee that he's not going to have an extension heading into next season. I think next season then would be a more so how do you respond from getting blown out by the Lions and the Rams?
Well, so the thing is we've seen that movie before, right? Like they had an 11-win season, right? 12-win season the year before, and then got immediately bounced. So it might be one of those where they start looking at him like people are looking at McCarthy.
Yeah.
Where they're like, regular season
Mm-hmm.
wins are great and all, but it'd be cool to win something in January.
See, that's the situation that's going to be. That's the situation that's happening in Green Bay right now, too, with Matt LaFleur. Matt LaFleur right now is kind of getting a lot of fire from Green Bay because everybody in Green Bay or everybody in Wisconsin, for that matter, is saying like how good of a regular season coach he is, and to respect to him, he is a great regular season head coach. But if Matt LaFleur doesn't win in the playoffs this year, or even next year for that matter, you're going to start hearing his name being on the chopping block to get out of Green Bay, because it's basically, yes, you can get us to the playoffs, but once we get there, you can't do anything with us.
That's not true because last year he did a lot more than that.
Yeah, I was going to say
won
he's
games
won
he
games.
wasn't supposed to.
Well, no, yeah,
No,
last,
this year he ain't getting past the
Yeah,
first
this-
round.
yeah,
You know what I
last
mean? He's going down to
Yeah.
Philly. I mean, I feel he's a much better team,
it's the
they are much better than they were from week 1.
yeah, it's the first 3 years of his tenure that people are still talking about, where you were 13-3, 13-3, 13-3. You had the 1 seed 2 of those 3 years, and you shit the bed in 3 straight NFC Championship games with 2 of them coming at home. That's kind of where a lot of the Packer fans are like, you got us to 13-3, you got us to the NFC Championship game, but you didn't get past it. How much longer can we hold on to you if you're not going to get past that point?
Yeah, I mean,
Well-
essentially that's how McCarthy got let go.
Yeah.
Was he would get to the championship game and then that was it.
So, speaking of which, was McCarthy let go yet?
No.
No, he wasn't let go yet. But I
Surprised?
would say, like, I know Joe was asking. Jerry has come out and kind of roundabout said that he doesn't see him not coming back. Right? He basically praised him for this a little bit here and there. There was no indication from Jerry like he was like this guy's on the chopping block. But at the same time, I don't know if Jerry's going to say nothing right now. I think they're still evaluating it. I still think they're still trying to figure it out. So if you ask me, I think with Jerry Jones and McCarthy, I think that's still way up in the air. I don't think there's been a decision one way or the other, to be honest with you.
I mean, it's Black Monday. A lot of guys get fired today. Doug Peterson was the first one to go this morning.
Yeah.
Surprisingly,
And I think you're right, and I think that's going to be the telltale signs. And I think over the next couple of weeks, that will tell whether or not McCarthy's going to stay or if he's going to go.
surprisingly, there's not as many coaches getting fired today as I expected. Honestly,
Well, of course, because some of them got fired earlier in the year.
well, no, like seeing Gerard Mayo get fired yesterday was a shock to me. Like I understand that there was a lot of turmoil with the Patriots this year, and you kind of started hearing that he was on the hot seat midway through the season, but I still thought they were going to give him at least one more year, knowing that they have a top 3 pick in the draft again this year and kind of seeing what they do with it. I figured he would get one more year out of it. Seeing Brian Dable and the GM come back in New York was a surprise to me. I thought for sure that Jay Shane would be out.
Good for them because that's somebody who's got the right idea.
Yeah. I'd like Brian Dable I thought was going to be safe just because it wasn't his decision to give Daniel Jones the contract over Saquon Barkley. Like I figured Brian Dable was going to be safe for at least one more year, but I am shocked that Jay Shane is back, especially after the whole Saquon debacle. I thought he'd be the first one fired this morning.
Are the Jets still staying with Douglas as their GM, or are they decided they're going to let him go?
No, Joe Douglas was fired.
Well, Douglas was fired like 6 weeks ago.
Yeah.
Okay, I missed that one then. Okay.
And so Doug should have been fired after the 52-point Lions beat down.
Yeah.
It was November 17th, something like that.
Yeah.
Like that's when he should have got fired on the flight home.
Hey, with all the coaching vacancies, obviously that should be coming around. Do you? I know Gruden was slightly mentioned when Chicago fired Eberflus. Do you think Gruden ever makes it back in the league, or do you think he's just done?
I think he gets back to the league, but I don't know if he becomes a head coach again. I could see him coming back as an OC. I could see him coming back maybe as a GM because, to his credit, he does know a lot about football. He might not be like the greatest head coach out there, but if you made him a GM, I think he could actually build up a team pretty well just because he has all that experience when he used to do that one college show that he did where he was like working with the scouts. So like he does know like a lot about football outside of the head coaching ring. So I wouldn't be shocked if he became a GM. I just don't see him being a head coach anymore.
You know, the thing that's funny is he's already done some advisory roles for a couple of teams.
Yeah.
So, I mean, he's finding his way back.
Yeah.
And he's also been doing some advisory stuff in the European Football League. So, I mean, he's been around football for the last few years. So for him to be getting mentioned is not a shock to me. I would bet that he finds his way back to an actual NFL position. Head coach, probably not the first thing back, but it wouldn't shock me.
John Gruden.
I feel like Gruden has a lot to give. I mean, he's still young. He's had good success with the Raiders, good success with Tampa. I mean, you could take Oakland probably out of the second time they came there, but I mean, but with all that given, and honestly, it was the emails that kind of did him in, right? I mean,
yeah, but like with Gruden, though, like how Bo said that Gruden's been having like these advisory roles the last couple of years. That's kind of why I see him becoming a GM over a head coach because now he's kind of getting into like that higher up role where he's assisting in like how to develop a team, assisting in how to put a team together. And now it's just like, fine, go and take a GM role for the next 3-4 years, see what you can do.
Because that's what you want out of your GM, right? You want somebody that has great eye for talent, somebody that can develop talent, things like that. Those are all the qualities I would want in my GM. So I can definitely see him being a GM.
Yeah, I like it when the GM is actually a football guy.
Yeah.
Would you put him in the Jets job?
No.
I don't even know if he'd want to take the Jets. I don't think who would want to take the Jets job.
Well, listen, I feel like the owner right now has got to give up all leverage here.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Like, you don't have any more say when your team shits the bed that badly. You know what I mean? It's just you have to definitely, rethink your entire. This is $8 billion franchise, $9 billion franchise,
yeah, exactly.
the fourth most expensive franchise in the NFL.
Yep.
This guy has. So, it's time for you to stop meddling and start to bring somebody in who could conceivably change the entire culture around.
That's kind of
So if we were to have fun with this, right? If you want to have the most dysfunctional Jets team possible, which to be honest, football is better when
put Rex Ryan as head
the
coach.
Jets
Gruden as
are
the
a
GM.
train wreck. You have Gruden as your GM,
Rex
Rex Ryan
as
as your head coach, and you keep Rodgers as your quarterback. Like that dynamic would be the most explosive, ridiculous thing.
That's
And
why
watch them go like 13-4
Yeah.
and wind up, working their way into the AFC Championship game.
that's why
I mean, Rex could do that though. So
Yeah.
I mean,
that's kind of why I think if Gruden does end up as a GM somewhere, I do think Chicago is where he would end up. Just because even though Ryan Poles hasn't officially been fired yet by Chicago, there are a lot of reports out of Chicago that they want him gone when the new head coach comes in, and they kind of want to have that GM and head coach linked together.
For sure. Yeah.
So I could see a scenario where Ben Johnson takes the Chicago head coaching job if he wants it, and then you bring in John Gruden as your GM because at least Gruden's got Caleb Williams set at quarterback, a young quarterback who he has experience from back when he was in college, just doing all the scouting shows that he's done. Gruden knows what it takes to actually build up an offensive line, so that would be his main focus in free agency, his main focus in the draft. And he's one of those GMs that I think would hold people accountable, where if things aren't working, he's not going to hesitate to fire people like Chicago did, where it's like, oh, we're going to let this head coach suck for 2.5 years, and finally we're going to fire him because we just don't have a choice at this point.
Yeah. I mean, I just feel like with that Chicago job, I'm sorry, I feel like with that Chicago job, but like you said, with the capital, the picks, everything that they have, same thing out there with New England. God, they got 130 million in cap. You really, when you got that much to offer a new coach or GM coming in, I really feel like they got to do their due diligence. Don't make a quick hire out of it. Make sure you're really doing that due diligence because there's a lot that can be done to turn both of those franchises into contenders if they have the right GM and coach. And like you said, it has to be that right marriage where you got the right guys in place that can really manifest what those teams have to offer in terms of capital and picks and things like that, right?
The difference
when you have a
between
ton of cap space, though, it also means there's nobody on your roster.
Yeah, see the difference between
I get that, right? But is that always a bad thing? Because then you almost have a clean slate to work with and build up, and you can make that really your team.
The difference between the Patriots and the Bears, though, are outside of Drake May and maybe even Ramondre Stevenson, the Patriots really have nothing on that team right now. And it's going to take them probably another 3 years to even get to a point where they're going to be playoff contenders probably in 3 years.
But that's 3 years, I think, if you have the right
the
right GM in
you
there.
could change things over in a year anymore. You could. 130 million.
Yeah.
You could absolutely change things up. You could get
look at the Commanders.
Yeah, at least with the
Commanders did exactly that.
At least with the Bears, though,
You're
right?
Right.
The Bears have the Bears are a situation where they're kind of in win now mode. The only thing they really need to do is address that offensive line because you have a young quarterback, you have your young receivers, you have your running back, you still have a young defense that's going to be a top 15 defense. It's just that the offensive line has always been an issue for Chicago, and you had a head coach in Matt Eberflus that had really no idea what he was doing. Where you bring a guy like Gruden and a guy like Ben Johnson or like any one of these young and upcoming coaches into that Chicago situation, if you focus on offensive line, which is what that team should be focusing on, the Bears are in a position where they're pretty much in win now mode because they've addressed everything they need to address the last couple of years to set them up for where they're set up right now.
I think if you have Bobby Slovic as your coach, Gruden as your GM, that could be a really good combination to really get that offense where it needs to be. Because look what Slovic did with under DeMeco Ryans with Texans. When they brought in Stroud, they were literally right there in the playoffs.
He's taken a big downfall this year after how bad Houston's played this year. Like a lot of injuries took him into play, but he had a rough year this year. Play calling Bobby Slowick.
Well, everybody has a rough year. I don't want to write him off. I wouldn't write him off just off.
I won't either.
But I just say, Gruden with his eye for talent and developing and things like that, and good player person, and then you bring a Slovic who is really good with young talent and things like that, and good offensive mind, young guy, good idea. That could really be a good marriage over there.
It could.
Yeah. But
especially with a team that's been struggling on offense for decades.
so I guess that's the reason why that they fired the head coach, though, because they feel that they don't want him in charge of that $130 million. Like that's like, if we're going to do this, we need to make a complete turnaround. And I think you are not the guy that leads us into battle next year.
It would have been not that they could have figured that out early on. I mean, I feel like Mayo, I didn't agree with him as being the head coach, but it's still at the same time, man. 1 year, man, come on. I mean, that's just doing somebody dirty.
Yeah, I'm not a fan of letting a coach go after 1 year.
Yeah, but he was a plant.
Okay.
And that's kind of where I think that they wanted done with the Belichick era completely, and he was a plan after Belichick.
So do you think they're doing that, or do you think they go get Vrabel now?
I think they get Vrabel, and then what's the point of getting rid of Mayo, because Vrabel's also a Belichick descendant.
Exactly.
Yeah, but I think that when you have turmoil in a locker room and a coach can't resolve it, like that's the more the telltale. That was the reason why Sirianni was on the hot seat at the beginning of this year or the end of last year. Like, because there was turmoil, you could tell there was turmoil, and they could not get rid of it. So that's why when you feel that it's no longer football that's causing the losses, that's a big deal. That's directly, listed with the head coach. Yeah, a football guy told me this not too long ago. He's like, listen, there's, the offensive coordinator, his job is to score points. The defensive coordinator, his job is to stop the other team from scoring points.
Mm-hmm.
And the head coach's job is to win.
Mm-hmm.
That's it. And when you are having things in your locker room that aren't football related, that are causing losses, that's when you have to change it up completely. You cannot let that coach go on. I understand why they brought Nick Sirianni back. They gave him now all of the, all of the right pieces, because now we have an offensive coordinator. I mean, we talked a little bit about Kellen Moore this year, but he looked like a genius in this offense.
Mm-hmm.
We won 14 games. Realistically, you could say that we really only lost one game to Tampa Bay, because if they make 2 catches, we're 16-1.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So, I mean, there's the argument to be made all the way around that, hey, Kellen Moore is as advertised, maybe, that there's a reason why that he was so good, but it could also be the reason that, Saquon Barkley.
Yeah, and that's
right.
and that's the big reason why I think the Lions are as good as what they are too, is when you look at that Lions coaching staff, you have Dan Campbell, the head coach, you have Ben Johnson, the OC, you have Aaron Glenn, the DC. Aaron Glenn is in charge of the defense. He runs everything with the defense. Dan Campbell is there for meetings, but he really doesn't say much. He's there for meetings. Ben Johnson coaches the offense. He has the game plans. He creates the game plans. He puts everything in play. Dan Campbell's there for the meetings, and he really doesn't influence what Ben Johnson wants to do on offense. He's literally on the sidelines, and the only time that Dan Campbell has any influence is if they go for it on 4th down or not. Otherwise, he's letting his OC do his own thing. He lets his DC do his own thing, and then
he's being a manager. He's being a manager, which is what they're supposed to be. If you have the right coordinators in place.
What's this or not part? He goes for it on every 4th down.
Well, that's what I'm saying. That's the only time he ever has really any influence on the game. Because even if he says we're going for it on 4th down, he still lets Ben Johnson call the play for 4th down. He doesn't influence the play call. It's we're going for it on 4th down. But then whatever Ben Johnson calls, Dan Campbell's if that's what you want to call, that's what we're going with.
What's up, Joe? Good to see you. Happy New Year.
He trusts his assistants enough to kind of run everything for him, and that's what all good organizations do. Same thing with Nick Sirianni. He's got a great defensive coordinator in Vic Fangio. He's got an historically great offensive coordinator in Kellen Moore. He trusts them enough to do what they're being paid to do. Kellen Moore is being paid to run the offense. Fangio is being paid to run the defense, and Nick Sirianni is being paid basically to manage the coaching staff.
Yeah, Joe, He had the same type of offense with the Cowboys, and the
Yeah, we
Cowboys
had a
hated him
good
because they
offense,
said he was
Captain.
too predictable.
And he had a good
I've
year.
said that
He had
for
a good year in
years.
San Diego too.
He doesn't put enough
With the Chargers.
motion in his damn offense to keep the defense guessing. You're right. He's very predictable.
So,
Well,
but
your
not
defense
anymore.
is guessing. Your defense
It's
is all the
different now.
guessing. You're just guessing where they were even going to be on the field.
He wasn't predictable
Yeah.
last year either. He was with the Chargers last year, and he wasn't predictable as an offensive coordinator with the Chargers last
I
year.
mean, he may have changed it up, I guess, then, but I know with the Cowboys, he was extremely predictable.
Yeah, with the Chargers, he had a very good offense last year. It's just the fact that Brandon Staley was a freaking moron last year and lost how many games for the Chargers because of the decisions he made.
Well, it also didn't help that Herbert got hurt. towards
Yeah,
the end.
but like even at that though, at least the offense was still scoring 26, 27 points a game last year with the Chargers. Like defensively, they were terrible last year on defense with the Chargers, but at least Kellen Moore was not a predictable offensive coordinator last year. He started to open up that playbook a lot with the Chargers last year.
Yeah, they
So-
were putting up almost 30 points a game.
Yeah.
So going the opposite way, when Pittsburgh gets bounced this week against Baltimore, do they start looking for a coach?
No.
That is the one organization that they've been around for 60 years, and they've only had like 5 coaches in their 60 years as a franchise. Like that organization is so loyal to their coaches. You pretty much have to bottom out not only one season, but you pretty much have to bottom out for probably 2 or 3 years in a row before they would even consider moving
Yeah.
on. From
I
it.
Yeah,
agree
they've
with
had
that.
as many coaches since they became a team as the Panthers have had in the last 3 seasons.
Yeah,
That's about right. That's about
Like-
right.
Bill Cowher retired. Otherwise, if Bill Cowher didn't retire, there's a chance that he probably would have coached another 4 or 5 years before they got Tomlin. And if that was the case, they probably don't get Tomlin anyways.
Right.
True.
Well, and then because I'm saying right now that I got to imagine that, I understand people in Pittsburgh. You know what I mean? They are very loud when their team is great, and they are very quiet when their team is not. And right now they're very quiet. And you hear the rumblings like, why are we doing this again? We said this last year. We're going to make it into the playoffs. And they only made it in. Was it last year because of the tie?
Yeah.
That they wind up making it into the playoffs
Yeah.
because
Well, they finished 9-8, but the team that they needed to lose ended up tying to go 8-8.
No. That was because they didn't tie.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah, it was. They would have been 9-7-1.
Yeah.
And San Diego
Called
wind
the
up calling the timeout.
Yep.
But I think it was 2 years ago though. I don't think it was last year. It might have been 2 years ago.
Yeah, 2 years ago when the Chargers needed, all the Chargers had to do was tie, and then the Steelers didn't get in, and they're like, nope, we're going to call the timeout before the Raiders kick the field goal instead of literally just letting the clock run out.
Right.
Hey,
So
Pags, Joseph made a comment a minute ago where he said he feels like the Eagles are 100% going to the Super Bowl. That's a big statement considering how good that Detroit Lions team is. Do you feel like Joseph is, that you're 100% going to the Super Bowl, or do you think that there's going to be some opposition?
I'm staying with what I said at the beginning of the year. What I said at the draft, what I said at the end of last year. I thought that it was going to be Eagles and Detroit in the NFC Championship game. And I don't know what happens after that. I think that game is going to come down to a one-possession game. And I kind of like our chances at that point because I feel like Dan Campbell could try to do something that he shouldn't do at the wrong time.
Yep.
And that mistake could allow us to go to the Super Bowl. But I tell you, it's going to be this Super Bowl is going to be Detroit and Philly. Like I feel like they are the two best teams in the league.
In my
As a matter of
opinion,
fact, I think you guys match up extremely well on offense and defense. I mean,
They
you
do.
guys are right there neck and neck with each other in terms of talent, coaching, and things like that. And I do believe it's going to be, and I said it earlier, I said it's going to be Eagles, Detroit. And I can't say it's going to be 100% either way because I think that's going to be a very hard fought game.
No, I think that's a coin flip.
yeah, I think
so too.
in my
Absolutely.
opinion, though, whoever comes out of the NFC to get to the Super Bowl, I think is going to win the Super Bowl just because they're going to have to earn it more than whoever comes out of the AFC.
No, I agree with that. And if you happen to like gambling as much as Dan Campbell, you can do it right here on Coast to Coast using the QR. code on the screen, up to 125% of your first 3 deposits and 10% bet guarantee if you happen to go for it on 4th and miss. Also, if you're here in the Pacific Northwest, use the QR code here for True Fusion Gym. Free 5-day pass at any of the 3 locations: Bellevue, Ballard, University Village, Pilates, boot camp, yoga, bar, and more. Find your edge at True Fusion Gym. All right.
I will say this.
Seemed like a good way to
I will say
Oh,
this.
that
I
was
will
perfect
say this
timing.
though. I am a huge fan of those Lions uniforms last night, and I kind of wish those would be their uniforms going forward because that blue helmet looked sick last night with the black.
I actually like that as well. I
That
like
those
the black and the blue.
those uniforms are sick.
No, I thought it was a nice looking. It's probably one of the better looking uniforms I've seen them wear. That I like the all white uniform too, though. But yeah,
Yeah, I mean that will probably be true. It'll come down to whatever Saquon does, and it'll come down to a Dan Campbell 4th down in a bad spot. If he gets it, he probably wins and looks like a genius. And if he doesn't, they're gonna be like, Dan Campbell threw the game away.
4th
But
and
you
18
know what, though? You
on
can say
4th and
the
18
same
on their
thing
own end of
that
the
you
field.
can say about Barkley. You can say the same thing about Jameer Gibbs. The guy put up 4 touchdowns on a good Minnesota
He was
defense
killing it.
last night.
Yeah,
I mean, you can make that same argument for the Eagles. Can they stop Jameer Gibbs? Can they stop Amon St. Brown? Can they stop, Williams? I mean, there's a lot of people out there that
St. Brown is going to be the interesting one because obviously
Right.
he's going to get Guantanamo. You know what I mean?
But you know what I
He's
think gets
gonna-
overlooked, Pags? I think Sam Laporta is the one that gets overlooked, honestly.
Yeah, but see that would be Cooper. Cooper DeJean is going to wind up
Yeah.
covering him.
and the thing is
So-
too that people are forgetting. David Montgomery is eligible to come back
Yes.
for the divisional round. The question is,
But I
how
don't know if
much-
they're going to go away from Jameer Gibbs. I mean, that guy's playing
No,
so
Jameer Gibbs.
good right
Jameer Gibbs will be your top back, but the question
Yeah.
is, when Montgomery comes back, how many touches does he get? Even if it's
now.
like
That's
10
on his health, I would imagine. I mean,
even
they're
if
gonna
it's
probably
15
evaluate him pretty
touches,
tough.
even if it's 15 touches, that's still 15 fresher touches that Gibbs is going to have, where he can make that
Oh,
much. more
absolutely. Absolutely.
I bet it's not that much because he's coming off an injury. I bet he
Yeah.
gets like 8 to 10.
That's kind of what I was thinking.
But even at that, though, that's still 10 less touches for Gibbs to be on the field and do something else.
Do you want him to have 10 less touches? Dude just lit up the Vikings.
No, you don't. I'm not saying like 10 less
Like,
touches, but like
yeah.
put him in the wideout spot. Use him as
Yeah,
like a
no, I
wing
got
back.
I got you.
I mean, unless of those 8 to 10 touches, Montgomery just goes off, right? Then I can see him stick with him a little bit. But I got to imagine that they're not going to, like you said, Bo, they're not going to go away from Jameer. Not after what he's been putting up all year.
No, he's been killing it.
Yeah.
Actually, Robert, that's not true at all. In fact, we did that with Pittsburgh, where Pittsburgh said, "Okay, we're going to have you beat us by the air," and what did we do? We still do have one of the best receiving tandems in the NFL.
Right.
You know what I mean? It's still, Devonta Smith and AJ Brown, who's always open. He got a belt yesterday that says he's always open.
It also helps that the Steelers struggle to put points on the board.
So,
Man.
well, the Steelers. So I think, honestly, that's where you'll see Tyreek Hill go.
That would be interesting.
You know,
He's gonna go
I'm
back to
saying that
Kansas
he's
City.
going there, or like for some reason I kind of think Dallas. I know that you mentioned Kansas City again. He's not going to Kansas City. They're not going to take him back.
I think they would because they're going to lose Hopkins.
Dude, you put Tyreek Hill opposite of CeeDee Lamb. Jeez, man, that could be really good. And then, God forbid, if we were able to draft Alshon Gentry in the draft, I don't think he'll make it to us. But
So
wow.
I think
you
I
guys are
think
drafted 12. I don't think that's going to be
No.
I don't think that's going to be a thing.
I think Hill ends up back
Yeah.
in Kansas. I think Hill ends up back in Kansas City. I think he goes there and replaces DeAndre Hopkins. I think he's willing to accept the fact that the grass isn't always greener on the other side. And I think he's going to he's finally come to terms with how good he had it in Kansas City when he was there.
Yeah,
Well,
I mean,
that's
it's
great,
gonna
but
come down to who wants to pay him.
it doesn't always mean that you get to go back home.
I think I could see the Chiefs doing it just because their offense.
And he's still got 3 more years left on his deal. In
I don't know
Miami.
if Bo would want to do that, Robert. Bo, would you want to literally give up DK for Hill?
So here's the thing: is you never question if Hill is going to give full effort on the play. DK has some of that. He will run a lazy route. If the play's not going his way, you'll see him run one of the worst routes ever. So, you know, and he's been doing a lot of, you know, he has a lot of those personal fouls after the play and stuff. I mean, don't get me wrong, amazing athlete, right? So I'm not saying any of that, but if you were to be able to get rid of him for a guy that can also tear the top off, I wouldn't hate that. You know, you'd also probably get him for similar money, right? Because DK is a $31 million cap hit next year.
Yeah.
So, I mean, potentially something like that could work. I don't see him doing it because you're going to end up with a similar guy that you still can't reach because you don't have an offensive line, and you're going to have to give up draft picks to make that trade. So I don't really see that being a thing.
Yeah, the CBS just dropped a list of like the 5 most likely landing spots for Hill next year. They have Washington at number 5. They have the Chargers at 4. They have the Packers at 3. They have the Chiefs at 2, and they have the Falcons at 1.
Wow. Opposite of London for Penix to take over.
That's
That could be.
the thing with the Penix situation where they want Penix to have the deep ball threat.
God, well, he'll have 2. Well, yeah, he'll have. Geez, when you got London, and then you got Pitts too. I mean,
Well, the way he was sailing some balls, them getting a guy that's a little bit faster might be helpful.
yeah, you ain't lying. Holy cow!
And it is just confirmed that Christian Watson has a torn ACL, so he is done for the playoff.
Yeah,
He is
they said it was a non-contact injury, so
He's done for this year and most likely a large chunk of next year too. And with this being the final year of his contract, now it's a situation of do the Packers bring him back or what's in store for him next?
Well, I mean, he is going to lose most of next year, right? I mean, even if he's ahead of schedule, he'd be ready like week 10.
November. Yeah, November. Yeah.
So there's a chance that they just cut him.
Hey Joe, I know you want. I know you're talking about Parsons for Travis Hunter. I don't know if I like that, man. I mean, you're giving up a good portion of our middle defense, or even on the edge defense, because Parsons could play either way for Travis Hunter. I mean, I just I don't like that. I don't like that.
Yeah,
hope they don't
I
do
wouldn't
that.
do that.
I wouldn't do that.
yeah, I don't know. I don't know.
I mean, that is a Jerry splash move. So to say that Jerry wouldn't do something like that, he likes to make a splash, but I don't think that's a splash I would want to make.
He would absolutely do something dumb like that. But I mean, the big thing is you can be the best corner in the world, but if you don't have any pass rush, and you've seen when Parsons wasn't out there, they had 0 pass rush, right? You can be the best corner in the world, but if you got to cover somebody for 6 seconds, they're going to be open.
Yep. It is.
Yeah.
It is funny that you just mentioned that too. There actually was a report that came out after the game last night that part of the reason why Mayo got fired is because they lost the number 1 pick. Similar to the Lovie Smith situation in Houston when they lost the number 1 pick.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, this is your final
Because you went from number 1 to
draft
number
picks
4.
right here.
You went from
And
number 1 to
I mean,
number
the
4.
Patriots, Raiders, and Jets all exactly. I mean, the Pats, the Raiders, and the Jets all hurt themselves. They all had shots at that number 1 pick.
So did the Giants.
So realistic, who do you think?
Yeah, exactly.
Knowing that the Titans are picking number 1 now, who do you think they realistically take?
God, I'm going quarterback today, unless you believe in Will Levis.
Which no one does.
No one does.
I think that's a prime time to take a Cam Ward or even what's the other kid out of Oregon, Gabriel.
Man, Gabriel, yeah.
Yeah, I like
But
that.
they,
kid.
I mean, it depends on what happens with Kirk Cousins
Yeah.
because that right now it looks like Kirk Cousins to Tennessee is going to happen.
God,
So if Cousins goes to Tennessee, what does Tennessee do with the number 1 pick? Do you go after Travis Hunter? Or
You do the smart thing and you trade it for a whole bunch of other number 1 picks
Hell
and
yeah,
start
you do.
going and start doing offensive linemen. That would be me.
Yeah,
But that's just me.
exactly.
That's why.
If
That's
you're
why I
gonna
don't
take
get
on
paid the
Cousins,
big
you
bucks.
want all that
GM.
protection.
Yeah, because it does look like they said the two most likely destinations right now.
I mean,
for
if there's
Kirk
any
Cousins-
common theme, it's nobody wants to get off.
Here's the funny thing is the top two picks in the draft, Tennessee and Cleveland, are the two most likely landing spots for Kirk Cousins right now. And I think Cleveland at this point might even be more likely because I don't know if you guys saw the report this morning, but Deshaun Watson has had a setback with his Achilles surgery. And now he's looking like 2025 might not be a possibility for him to get back on the field.
Yeah, I mean, it's why they restructured his deal.
Yeah.
Is they made it so they can move on. So
That's why I think ultimately
they added a couple of years, which basically just pushes the cap hit out.
Yeah.
And I would pick them to grab a quarterback at this point.
that's why if Cousins goes to Cleveland, then I see Tennessee taking a quarterback. If Cousins goes to Tennessee, I see Cleveland taking the quarterback. Those top two teams are the two most likely landing spots for Cousins right now are Tennessee and Cleveland.
If I'm the Browns, I would be drafting a quarterback.
Oh,
What
yeah, I would
do
be.
is have another Band-Aid guy and not build for the future. Because, I
Right.
mean,
See, there, you definitely go for Shador then, because you know, thinking about how maybe in 2 years or 1 year after they fire the next coach, you could have Deion come in.
And the reason why Cleveland, in my opinion, makes the most sense for Cousins at this point is Kevin Stefanski, because he was Cousins' offensive coordinator in Minnesota. It just makes logical sense because Cousins and him actually worked very
but
well
you never won anything.
He didn't win anything, but if you're gonna use like a bridge quarterback, even if it's for like 2 years, like if they still want to draft a quarterback, if you're gonna use a bridge quarterback, why not bring somebody in that is familiar with the Stefanski system, somebody that's had success with that Stefanski system before, where it's like, this is our system, Cousins. It might be a little bit different terminology wise, but you've been in my system for 3 years before Minnesota. You're literally coming here just to show Sanders, Cam Ward, or whoever we draft the ropes of the system.
Joe, I mean, that would just be a waste of money. Like at that point, if you were going to do something like that, you might as well just keep Winston in the house because at least the fans like him.
Yeah.
And he's-
Yeah. And he's still a good backup quarterback in case your other guy goes down. So
But that's what Atlanta did, didn't they? They got Cousins, and then they also drafted a quarterback. So Cousins is done.
Yeah,
Yeah,
but what,
I fully believe Cousins is done.
I don't necessarily. I'm not going to say he's done. My thing with Cousins this year was when you look at how late he tore his Achilles last year. He tore it in week 9 or week 10. There was no way that he should have been playing in week 1. There was no way that.
I don't think he has the velocity on his ball anymore.
That's because he was. I don't think he was ever fully healthy this year. There's no way that he recovered from an Achilles tendon, getting torn in week 10 by week 1. Like he should have
I'm
been.
not your Cousins guy stat guy, but I think at some point you have to say, look, this guy's older.
He is older.
Injury prone, Achilles injury.
But look at
I think
Rodgers.
it's
Though,
just
like
time to move on from him.
But look at Rodgers though. Like Rodgers tore his Achilles tendon in week 1. And granted, like the Jets didn't have a good year this year by any stretch of the imagination, but Rodgers' overall numbers were still pretty solid this year: 25 or 26 touchdowns and 8 interceptions.
I mean, they ended up that way. They weren't that great.
I know, but at least Rodgers, like you can make the case that Rodgers was healthy when the season started because he tore his Achilles in week 1 and had like the full 12 months to get ready. Cousins tore his Achilles.
But also Rodgers, when it comes to him getting ready from that Achilles, he is a very tactician. I mean, like he willed his way along with therapy and medical advances. I don't know if Cousins has it in him like Rodgers had that dog.
That's my point, though. I don't think Cousins was healthy in week 1, and that's why I think Atlanta drafted Penix. Because I was saying this to you guys even over the summer that I thought Penix should have been starting week 1 because I didn't think Cousins was going to be ready, and he looked like all season long that he was playing hurt.
Yeah.
There was not one game where maybe the one game would be the only game that you can say that he was healthy.
Yeah,
I think this is probably where this ends up too with Rob. There is it'll probably be that Russell Wilson type contract where they're eating it all, and somebody's going to pay him $1 million to come hang out.
Exactly.
And it'll probably go about as well as it is with Russ, right? Like they're on a 4-game slide, and that feels about what Kirk Cousins will do. He'll come in, he'll ball out for a couple of games,
Yep.
and then it'll fall off.
Like that's why if you're Cleveland and you know that Atlanta's still gonna have to eat that contract, you bring in Cousins for $2 million or whatever. You still got to pay Watson anyway. So essentially, you're paying what, 2 quarterbacks, roughly $30 million, which is basically the cost of one starter. You bring Cousins in as your bridge. You ride him as long as he's on the hot hand, and when he starts to go south, then you go with the rookie or whoever you draft.
Yeah, I mean, the thing is you already have that guy, and I mean, you already have Winston there. He knows the system.
He's leaving. I know where he's going to go to the Giants.
Why would you do that if you were him?
I mean, money.
Money.
If the Giants gave him like 2 years at 25, 2 years at $30 million, he'll take it. And then you just go to Brian Dable and see if Brian Dable can fix him.
Yeah, that doesn't sound like.
That sounds like a terrible idea. And on that note, we will talk about that more tomorrow.
You know, just did his ass to the Jets.
Yeah, I mean, either New York team. Like, talk about a disaster moving forward at this point. Neither New York team is a good fit for anybody. But if you're watching on YouTube, be sure to like and subscribe. Helps us bring our content to you. And, of course, if you're watching on Roku TV, stay tuned for the next hour. Other than that, we'll see you all tomorrow. Take it easy, everybody.
Introducing National Streaming Sports, live and on-demand sports talk programming that you can access 24/7. For the premier sports talk experience, tap into our Roku channel. Start your mornings with Mac and Jack covering all the weekend sports action. Then pour a cup and enjoy all the sports you can drink on the Coffee and Sports podcast. At midday, talk sports from east to west on the Coast to Coast podcast. Followed at night by some hot girl talk with Prim and Proper Sports featuring Sonia Pearson. Talk boxing on the Gloved Fist. Yankee fans tune in for Start Spreading the News. And there's more on the College Sports Huddle and Sports Scope with Robert Butler. There are 20 podcasts in all and 70 weekly shows giving us a 3.4-star viewer rating. To find us on Roku TV, search for National Streaming Sports on the Roku search bar. Click on the logo and you're in. National Streaming Sports.